seas cover more than 70% of the Earth's surface. As the planet's largest ecosystem, the ocean regulates the climate, generates most of the oxygen we breathe, and provides livelihoods for billions of people. For much of the world's economy, oceans and seas serve as the foundation, supporting sectors from tourism to fisheries to international shipping. Yet, despite their importance, oceans are facing an unprecedented emergency. As a result of human activity and climate change. Every year, an estimated 8 million tons of plastic waste end up in the world's oceans. At the same time, climate change poses adverse effects on the ocean and marine life, including the rise in ocean temperatures, ocean acidification, deoxygenation, sea level rise, the decrease in polar ice coverage, coastal erosion, and a sharp decrease in marine biodiversity.
Rising carbon emissions are making the ocean more acidic, weakening its ability to sustain life underwater and on land. Plastic waste is choking the ocean. More than half of the world's marine species may stand on the brink of extinction by 2100 if we continue on the current track.
How are we tackling these challenges? What is being done by countries, communities, and the international organizations to advance ocean action? That's the global debate. Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to another brand new episode of the Global Debate, where we are going to talk about one of the most critical issues facing the world today, how to protect the oceans and seas, which are under increasing threats from pollution to climate change to overfishing. So what kind of collective action is needed to revitalize the oceans that drive global systems and make the Earth habitable? To discuss all of these aspects, I'm pleased to welcome on the program today a distinguished set of panelists who are joining us from different parts of the country. I welcome Ms. Anna Jöborn. She's CEO, Swedish Foundation for Strategic Environmental Research. She joins us from Sweden. I also am pleased to welcome Professor Reinhold Hanel. He's head, Thünen-Institute of Fisheries, Ecology in Bremerhaven, Germany. Ms. Caroline Lundquist, Associate Professor at the University of Auckland. And Mr. Balakrishnan Nair, TM. He's Group Director, OSAR, Indian National Centre for Ocean Information Services. It is an autonomous body under the Ministry of Earth Sciences, the Government of India. Thank you to all my guests and welcome to Sansad TV. Ms. Jöborn, allow me to begin the program today with you. So the ocean provides significant social, economic, also environmental benefits to the humanity and the planet we live in. Yet this essential global resource is in danger today. Help us and our viewers understand what are some of the most immediate threats that the oceans face and which require urgent global attention.
Thank you. Actually, I would like to focus on people and the need of knowledge. That's, you presented all these challenges, and I think the experiences and the knowledge about these problems is one of the most problematic issues that we have to deal with. So how you spread this information, how you also act on the information is the key challenge in itself.
Absolutely. And whether these challenges have been identified as one that requires collective global action. So in that aspect, 2021 to 2030 has been proclaimed as the decade of ocean science for sustainable development. Ms. Lundquist, let me come to you. Have all of these challenges that pose a threat to our oceans today been identified as the one that require urgent action for this ocean decade?
So much of what's going on actually in the UNESCO Ocean Decade is actually helping to both identify and then promote more science to help understand these different challenges to the ocean. I know in New Zealand, where I am, one of our key issues is actually what comes off of land. And so we are looking not just at activities going on the ocean like fisheries, but also one of the concepts in New Zealand from our indigenous Maori is Ki'uta Ki Tai. And here we're looking at connecting the mountains to the sea. So what happens on land and how do we actually look at the impacts of land on the oceans, whether it's increasing dairy cows and cattle on land and then the nutrients associated with that, but also when we change land management practices. So for example, when we convert pristine forests to other types of land use, whether it be forestry or agricultural or pastoral uses, we're often clearing the native forest, and that results in typically a lot more sediment erosion that then eventually makes it down our freshwaters and lands on the coast. So those sediments as well as nutrients tend to be big issues, and we can't manage, at least in New Zealand, but certainly the rest of the world, we can't manage the oceans without recognizing the impacts that are coming from land.
Absolutely. And all of these factors, Professor Hanel, we have been speaking about, these are, of course, man-made problems which have put our oceans in danger. One important aspect is illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, one of the greatest threats to marine ecosystems. Is there an international framework currently in place to address fisheries management globally?
Well, of course, there are several initiatives to fight against IUU fishing. But you have to say that, I mean, it's an international problem, and it can only be tackled internationally, but with, of course, with the consent of all single nations. So there are good practices now to fight against illegal fishing by having a better identification of ships on the ocean, but there is also other tools to identify IUU fishing, but it's still a global problem of an unbelievable high economic damage for certain regions, especially for regions in the south.
And are there provisions in the frameworks that exist, Professor Hanel, are there provisions to specifically address the management of fisheries at all levels, be it global, be it regional, or the national levels?
No, we don't know enough of the fish stocks of the world. There are really good examples for fisheries management, especially in countries where the fish stocks are basically managed by one country. As soon as more than one country is involved in managing a fish stock, the problems arise. And everywhere where, for example, in international waters, but also in waters, in multinational waters, it is very, very difficult to manage fish stocks. And most of the really bad examples are from these waters. And many parts of the world still fail in a proper fisheries management. It is also very much dependent on what Anna Jöborn said. We need to know, we need to have the data, the scientific data, to really provide guidance for fisheries managers for a good and sustainable management.
Absolutely. One important area which requires some kind of action and concrete action enough to help save oceans. Mr. Nair, coming to you to understand, we have spoken about these factors leading from climate change to pollution, to also technological advances, overfishing, all of these contributing to the grim situation that our oceans and seas face today. Which are the regions and particularly the countries which are bearing the maximum brunt in terms of livelihoods, in terms of prospects of food security having been decimated, and also in the longer term, opportunities for sustainability that have been damaged?
Yeah, it's a very good question and a very difficult question to answer also. In terms of the oceanic region is concerned, our Indian Ocean region where India is there, this is one of the different ocean compared to Pacific and Atlantic, because we have a cutoff from the north because of the Indian landmass. So in this area, the vulnerability of the coastal areas and ecosystem is more because this Indian Ocean have this thickest oxygen minima zone. So the increase of this oxygen minima zone or its spread towards other area definitely have a lot of impact on our fisheries as well as this other coastal ecosystem. So tackle this kind of issues, what is more important is actually, as some of the panelists told, to depend upon data and science. So we should have a permanent monitoring mechanism, generating the continuous data and the forecast services. So we should identify the locations which is the most vulnerable in all the ocean coast in terms of the ecosystem, in terms of the coastal erosion, in terms of other hazards. So what we require is a kind of a multi-hazard and multi-level the information system by which actually we can understand and also make our management strategies to the better ocean tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, so transformation is central to the ocean decade, Ms. Jöborn. We have to move beyond the business as usual to actually bring about true revolution in ocean science. So what is the kind of transformation that is required on an urgent basis to move from the ocean that we currently have to what we want for our future generations?
Yes, I think it's very important, this kind of discussions that we have right now, that we share knowledge between different regions and also cooperate between sectors and between different stakeholders, and that science is part of that. And also, as you mentioned, Dr. Balanar, information and the transparency and availability of information is very important. And as a good example, I would say the Baltic Sea, we have tremendous problems in the Baltic Sea, and we are a number of countries that cooperate both between science, different sectors, and try to find solutions. But it's really hard work, and I think we really have to leverage this cooperation. And I think that's why the Ocean Science Decade for Sustainable Development has an important task in this leverage of coordination, cooperation, and sharing of experience and knowledge.
When we talk about international collaboration, easier said than done because of the complexity of the global governance of oceans, also the intersection with multiple global conventions, which include climate change, biodiversity, also the laws of the sea. And these are practical problems that we are yet to find solutions to.
Yeah, see, as it is told, there is no political boundaries for the ocean process or any of ocean pollution or ocean resources. See, the best strategy is actually regional as well as the global, the corporation and global kind of a awareness or kind of a what I can enforcement for this kind of a purpose. For example, the UN decade, actually we have so many issues actually we are discussing now.
Global common is one aspect that I would like to touch upon. And Mr. Nair, the notion is, of course, that oceans and seas serve as global common. But with the ever-increasing demand that we have witnessed globally in recent decades, this concept seems to have eroded. So what we have been witnessing is that national and regional interests today have completely taken precedence over the urgency of oceans' well-being and the competition to exploit the commercial opportunities that the oceans present has only been increasing. How is India playing a transformative role in this as a country which is surrounded by seas and oceans on three sides?
We have many the ocean programs like the Deep Ocean Mission by the Government of India, Coastal Mission, Blue Economy Policy and Marine Fishery Policy. All these policies and all these programs actually when we are designed, we are take whatever you take the consideration of what you are told, because it is actually the ocean is not only the one country's property, it is a global property, because most importantly the entire our climate is based upon the ocean. So Government of India and the scientists at global level actually thinking about there should be a kind of a co-design for all these programs for the understanding, forecasting and exploiting the oceans. So most of the programs, whatever I see globally, because for ocean monitoring, we have the global ocean observation systems, and we have many the monitoring programs and the service programs, which is actually now means it is actually integrated by the World Meteorological Organization or International Oceanographic Commission. So I think the global initiatives for protecting the ocean, in the global as well as the regional scale, already in place, what I feel. Thank you.
Ms. Caroline, speaking of solutions, you along with a group of researchers have spoken of a multi-objective solution which, if implemented, could lead to the protection of 89% of the ocean's representative biodiversity areas and also 89% of threatened species, all while maintaining access to fishing grounds that provide 89% of the global catch. This is something that I came across while doing some research. Shed some more light on what this solution is, and especially when you talk about multi-objective solution, what is the kind of approach that will be required going forward?
So I think a lot of historically, when we're looking at planning for the oceans, people see protection being quite different from fisheries, so almost in opposition. And what we were looking at in this study that you mentioned was, can we come up with solutions that are both trying to figure out the best places for our threatened species and for biodiversity in the oceans, but also what are the best places for fisheries? So can we also identify, those optimal places, both in terms of revenue and value, but also feeding the world from our oceans? And how do we basically come up with that win-win where we're protecting both of those? And we've done this analysis both globally, which you've just presented those numbers, but also we've done, or just about to complete this analysis on New Zealand itself, where we're also looking at adding in an extra bit of analysis in there, where we're not just looking at balancing out areas for fishing, but we're also looking at how do we protect those really important spawning areas for fisheries. So where we know we have what we call BOFs, or big old fat females. And this is the work of one of my PhD students at the University of Auckland that we've been looking at. But how do we make sure that we're planning our oceans not just as conservation or not, but recognizing that there really is a multitude of uses that we have in the oceans, whether it's recreation or, as you mentioned, shipping. We have a lot more going on in terms of tidal power. I've even seen some plans for some solar power. So how do we manage those many competing uses, but some of them are actually complementary, where we can get win-wins?
So when we talk about getting a win-wins, Professor Hanel, are these some of the practical outcomes that couldn't be discussed largely among countries and adopted depending on the threat perception?
Yes, we're talking about marine spatial planning, and I think this is crucial, especially in coastal areas where most of the usage of the ocean takes place. And I think this is something which has to be started nationally, but then has to be adopted on an international basis. Otherwise, we don't take into account that there are no borders in the sea most of the time. So especially for fish populations, there are no borders. So we have to do this on an international basis. What Dr. Lundquist said is very crucial, that we find a balance between using the ocean and protecting the ocean to its various uses that mankind need from the ocean for a better life.
Ms. Jöborn, so the task at hand is to avert a tragedy to this global common that we are talking about, the oceans and the seas, restoring ocean health, repairing ocean ecosystems, and returning to sustainable use of oceans and seas. What is the way ahead, especially considering the complexities that it requires in terms of changes, in terms of updating of conventions that already exist?
I think the possibility to actually learn by doing is really important, and also strong political leadership is key for things to happen. But also we have to consider altruism. I mean, Professor Caroline Lundquist was talking about a win-win situation. We have to actually realize that being sustainable and taking care of the ocean, that is a win-win strategy, because we depend on it for our future. So taking responsibility and also a strong political will, I think it's key. And science can provide information. So science is also important for this to happen. But we can't wait for the information. We should act now and learn by doing. That's my message.
Professor Hanel, what is the United Nations doing to actually, take this kind of leadership? Ms. Jöborn spoke about the political leadership and the kind of will that is required. One or the other organization which has been tasked with this job to take everyone together to build international coordination has to take the leadership and show the way. So when we talk about ocean preservation, saving our oceans and preventing the decline that it has already witnessed over the last several decades, what are the kind of efforts that we see the various United Nations bodies, also the other international organizations taking in this regard?
Well, I think many of the UN organizations have this on their agenda. Look at the FAO, for example, at the Food and Agriculture Organization. They are really fighting for more sustainable fisheries and aquaculture in the world. And I also think that setting up an ocean decade, 10 years of ocean science is a sign that the UN has taken the message that we are in a critical period now. We really face a lot of challenges in the ocean, it was mentioned, and now we need new solutions. And therefore, having a multi-stakeholder development in this and really trying to get new solutions for a better ocean, I think it's very timely now, and we need to take the chance and go forward.
Certainly, and if you go by predictions, by 2100, Ms. Lindqvist, without significant change, more than half of the world's marine species will face extinction. That's what the United Nations has already said. And if carbon emissions continue to increase at the rate it is increasing currently, the ocean will corrode the shells of many marine organisms. What is the kind of urgent, short-term measure which is required to actually undo this damage that's already been done?
Well, I think looking at a lot of, for example, with our CBD, the upcoming targets, a lot of it is changing the way we're managing the ocean. So a lot of, for example, marine protected areas would have targets based on percentage rather than effectiveness. So we don't need paper parks. We need to put conservation measures in places where they're actually preventing harm. One of maybe a good example in New Zealand, we've recently finished in around the city of Auckland, which is a city of about 1.5 million, our largest city in New Zealand. We've finished a very large marine spatial planning process. And this was really something that came out of early legislation that formed a marine park, but the marine park didn't actually, it was a paper park. It didn't actually have any legislation that prevented harm. And over a series of state of the environment reports, yet it kept showing that everything was going further and further downhill. So a marine spatial planning process, which we called Sea Change, came out of this, and this had over 200 recommendations that came out of this. And one of them is actually quite an interesting take on how to do fisheries management for bottom trawling, that rather than having fisheries management and put marine protected areas as places where we're not fishing, instead put a total ban on bottom trawling within this large marine park area. So this is about 14,000 kilometers squared of ocean. So putting a total fishing ban for bottom trawling and then opening only small areas where it's deemed to be very low impact on the seafloor, and only those small areas or small trawl corridors are open to fishing. So we're basically taking that concept of, that win-win, but also sharing the space on the ocean. How can we minimize the impact of things like bottom trawling, which is one of our larger impacting fishing methods? How do we create ways where we do still have that production capacity of the ocean, where we're harvesting fish to feed humans, but also minimizing the impact of those more destructive activities?
Mr. Nair, another important aspect that Ms. Lindqvist mentioned was about the marine protected areas. So even though there was a significant increase over the past few decades, what has been observed is that they've been unable to achieve the desired conservation value. And that is a big concern, because one step forward, two steps behind is not going to be the solution to this grave challenge that we face.
See, the issue is that the marine protected areas in the Indian Ocean region, the most important thing is that the the awareness what we should actually create on the marine protected areas, especially for the fishing community. I think, and the enforcement, actually, we should actually see that how to make these areas more the protector, that is fine. But also, I think you have to actually, there is a balance between the fishery as well as the marine protected areas by a kind of a policy matters has to be come forward. That is more important for this sustaining this marine protected areas, also actually declaring more marine protected areas. And one more thing I want to add is actually the marine protected areas has to be designed with more studies and more the data on that, because whatever maybe we may say that marine protected area at this moment may not be same, but there is more areas can be declared as a marine protected area. So I think very clear policies are required for that. I think Government of India is actually coming with a marine protected area policy. Thank you.
We've spoken about what different countries, what different organizations need to do, what is the need of the hour to undo the kind of damage that we've seen in recent decades. But at the individual level, what is the responsibility globally of those who are living on the planet? What is the kind of responsibility that they should actually now, bring forth when it comes to reducing marine pollution? That is one significant aspect that is in our hands. Over 8 to 10 million tons of plastic waste being generated into the sea and oceans every year.
I think that, it's actually individual responsibility to, for example, reduce consumption and also think about where litter ends up. The ocean is like a big waste dump if we don't take responsibility. And there is information available and also good examples where individual choices have made a big difference. So regulation in combination with individual responsibility is very important. And there are a lot of good examples where that made a real change. And marine litter is one area.
Certainly. Okay, one last question. There's little time left. Professor Hanel, I'll take from you on the kind of funds which are needed. Can the developed world take a lead, especially when it comes to the funding aspect? Because all of these solutions will require money, which I believe is short at the moment.
Yeah, it has to take responsibility. I think in the global north, there is also a feeling. The ocean connects us all. It does not divide us, it connects us. And everything, wherever something is dumped into the ocean, it will end up probably somewhere completely different in the world. So we share this responsibility. And of course, it has a lot to do with education, but it also needs money. And therefore, there need to be funds also for countries that have larger problems to get to come to a very good management of their ocean, of their seas, and therefore there need to be funds that could be applied internationally, also in developing countries.
Mr. Nair, the UN Oceans Forum will be holding a conference later this month. What concrete can we expect from this much-awaited conference?
Yeah. This ocean conference at Lisbon, mainly protecting the oceans, and it is actually wide aspects actually will be discussed on the ocean economy, the sustainable ocean initiatives, and the decade of the oceans by the UN. So these are the main topics. I feel that it will be discussed in the Lisbon meeting that is on 29th of this month.
Yes, that having been said, I'll have to wind up the program today. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program today, sharing your thoughts, your perspective with us and our viewers. Absolute pleasure to have you all on the program today with us on Sansad TV. So that's it from us, viewers, on this edition of the Global Debate. We'll see you same time next week with another topic and a different set of panelists. Until then, take good care of yourselves and keep watching Sansad TV.